Ever since I was a kid, I've been obsessed with Egyptian hieroglyphics, this ancient, highly pictorial code of one of the oldest human civilizations. Almost everything we know about the early Egyptians, we know because of these quirky little icons: a hand, a foot, an owl, a snake. Each represents a letter, a sound, or even an object. Put them together and they tell a story, a history. For example, this is how Cleopatra was written in hieroglyphics. This is a K or a C, the lion is an L, the bird at the end is an A. The shell around it, the khartouche, means this is the name of an official figure. This would be my name, Muhammad. But I don't get a khartouche because I'm not a royal, though I do have aspirations. We didn't always know how to read this. For more than 1,000 years after Cleopatra's death, we lost the ability to decipher this ancient script. It wasn't until 1799 when a French soldier stumbled on a stone that caught his attention, the Rosetta Stone. This is one of the most important archaeological finds in history. And imagine, without it, we might not know anything about my ancestors. So as an Egyptian, I should be able to go see it anytime I want, right? Not without a British visa, because this vital piece of Egypt's history isn't in Egypt, it's in the British Museum. Today, it's displayed front and center, surrounded by hundreds of other ancient artifacts that, according to the plaques on the wall, were donated. Interesting choice of words. Egyptian archaeologists have been trying to get it back for decades, but the UK refuses to give it up. So why is the Rosetta Stone so important? And if it was found in Egypt by a Frenchman, how did it end up in London? I'm Mohammed Hassan, and this is Pinch Point, where geography and politics collide. In Egypt, there's a popular myth about how the Sphinx lost its nose. It goes like this. When Napoleon Bonaparte invaded in 1798, he was desperately in search of gold. He scoured the land, looting tombs, stealing artifacts, uprooting mummies from their sarcophagi. But he couldn't find the gold. It drove him mad, and when he reached the Great Pyramids, he became convinced the ancient Egyptians had hidden it inside the Sphinx. So he gathered his cannons and fired, splitting its face open to find only stone. This story is almost certainly not true, but parts of it are based on history. There was a grand battle at the pyramids in 1798 between the French Revolutionary Army and the Mamluks who ruled Egypt. Napoleon did have gunpowder and cannons, but the Mamluks didn't, and they were quickly defeated. When Egyptians rebelled again months later, Napoleon crushed the uprising, killing more than 5,000 people. Napoleon said France was on a civilizational mission to bring the Enlightenment to the world. Embedded within his army were scientists, geographers, and architects sent to study Egypt and bring back their findings. They took thousands of pieces of jewelry, scrolls, obelisks, even mummies. When Napoleon brought back these artifacts to France, it caused a frenzy, an Egyptomania. The country became obsessed with ancient Egypt. It was in paintings, in novels, on clothing. People would travel to Paris to be enchanted by the ancient artifacts on display at the Louvre, which for a time was renamed Musée Napoleon because of how many items he was bringing back from Egypt. It even transformed the study of archaeology, igniting a race to unlock the secrets of the pharaohs. And at the center of this race was this strange black stone. When the French army occupied an old Ottoman fort in the port town of Rashid, which the French knew as Rosetta, a commander stumbled upon a stone that caught his attention. On one side, it had a message written in ancient Greek, a language some of his scholar colleagues understood. Underneath it were two more passages written in languages he couldn't decipher, but he'd seen something similar on the walls of the ancient tombs. He didn't know what any of it meant, but it felt important. But before the stone could be shipped to Paris, the English invaded. In 1801, they defeated the French army, ending their 3-year occupation of Egypt. And then they returned all the stolen artifacts back to the Egyptians and went on their merrily way. I'm kidding, they shipped it off to London. In 1802, the Rosetta Stone, now branded with the seal of the British king, was put on display at the British Museum. The next year, linguists had translated the ancient Greek text. It was a royal decree, issued by Egyptian priests in the year 196 BCE. It tells of a mass revolt against the Greek Ptolemaic dynasty, during which Egyptians liberated the capital city of Thebes and ruled for 20 years. Then the Greeks crushed the rebellion, and a 6-year-old king was installed, Ptolemy V. He was the great-great-grandfather of Cleopatra. The archaeologists studying this decree understood that the ancient Greek was likely translated into hieroglyphics and Demotic, a more informal Egyptian script. By looking for patterns and clues in the Greek, they started to decode the other two languages. 20 years later, a French Orientalist named Jean-François Champollion finally cracked it. He realized that the king's name, Ptolemy V, was repeated across the decree. It stood out from the rest because it was surrounded by the cartouche that accompanied royal names. And so he broke it down letter by letter. Ptolmys. This was the Greek spelling. This was the key, the name of this infant king that unlocked the secrets to a whole civilization. To this day, the world is mesmerized by ancient Egypt.
If you will ask a child in any country and you tell him the word Egypt, he will tell you right away the Great Pyramid of Khufu, that people wonder how it was built. The Sphinx, the Golden Boy, the only tomb that was found completely intact. All this captured the hearts of people.
This is Zahi Hawass, probably the most famous Egyptologist in the world. He's kind of like a real-life Indiana Jones, complete with a fedora. For decades, he was a lone voice advocating for the British Museum to return the Rosetta Stone, but they've refused. When I reached out to the museum, they told me that they've received no formal request from the Egyptian government for the piece, though Hawass was for a long time Egypt's Minister of Tourism. They also said that the Rosetta Stone was only one of many similar decrees that were engraved, and that the others exist today in Egyptian collections. A spokesperson said that legally, the British Museum can't return any objects in its permanent collection because of the British Museum Act of 1963. It forbids the removal of any item from before 1850. Even items that it doesn't have space to display must be kept in permanent storage. And get this, of the more than 100,000 Egyptian pieces in the museum's collection, only 4% are shown to the public. The act does, however, allow the museum to lease items back to their countries of origin. That's what happened in 2024 with Ghana's Asante collection, looted 150 years ago. And yes, Ghana will have to return it back to the British Museum afterwards. In 1970, UNESCO issued a convention that forced countries to return artifacts proven to have been stolen. While this was an important move to try and stop the illicit trafficking industry, it only applied to anything smuggled after 1970. So archaeologists like Hawass say it legitimized what was taken from Egypt before.
If anyone is stolen an artifact, they'll never say if it's legal or illegal. They're not permitted to say. And museums really now in Europe and America still do bad things by buying stolen artifacts. And I cannot really understand how a museum do not have ethics. The Louvre bought many stolen artifacts. The Metropolitan, the same. We really need to stop all of this. We need museums to stop buying stolen artifacts.
When the Grand Egyptian Museum opened in November 2025, the government advertised it as the world's largest museum dedicated to a single civilization.
From the prehistoric period until the end of the Roman Empire in Egypt, with over 100,000 artifacts on display, some of which are being shown to the public for the first time.
Hawass used the occasion to launch a petition for the return of 3 celebrated Egyptian artifacts: the bust of Nefertiti, currently displayed in Berlin, the Dendera Zodiac, which is at the Louvre, and the Rosetta Stone. Germany has long refused to return the bust of Nefertiti, claiming at times it was too fragile to ship, and at others that it was taken legally in 1913, even though Egypt was under British occupation. Adolf Hitler famously blocked attempts to return it in 1933, saying he would never relinquish the head of the Queen. It's a similar story with France, which has refused Egypt's numerous requests for artifacts to be returned. In 2009, Egypt cut ties with the Louvre in protest. Now, even if we don't want to get sentimental about history, there's another reason these countries want their artifacts back. It's the same reason the museums won't give them up. It's because they bring in tourists, and tourists bring in money. It's impossible to calculate the value of the 100,000 Egyptian pieces in the British Museum's collection or the 50,000 held in the Louvre's archives. These items are priceless. But there are other ways of measuring their economic impact. In 2024, more than 6 million people visited the British Museum, making it the most popular destination for tourists in the UK. The Louvre got close to 9 million visitors. Through donations, private venue hires, and exhibitions, both institutions make more than $100 million every year. Money that countries like Egypt, whose artifacts contribute a lot to these museums' popularity, are denied. Some say ancient artifacts belong to the world, not to to their countries of origin. That's the argument that the Louvre and 17 other major museums made in a 2002 declaration, saying that, quote, over time, objects so acquired have become part of the museums that have cared for them, and by extension, part of the heritage of the nations which housed them. It sounds noble and universal, but let me tell you what else the French took from Egypt. Here's something that I'm struggling to wrap my head around. Pun intended. During the 18th and 19th centuries, European demand for Egyptian mummies went through the roof. French tourists would bring back mummies and put them on display in their houses. They would even host mummy unwrapping parties. Yes, there were so many mummies being shipped to France, they started using them for fuel in steam engines and as fertilizer for crops. Then they started using the bones in art supplies. French painters began mixing mummified human remains into their paint and created a new shade of brown, which became highly sought after. This painting by Edward Burne-Jones is believed to have been painted using mummy brown. Even Eugène Delacroix's Liberty Leading the People, one of the most well-known paintings in modern history, is suspected to have traces of human remains in it. European history is literally tainted with the blood of colonialism. There's really no way to escape it. By the early 1900s, supply of mummies started to dwindle, in part because of efforts by Egypt to stop grave robbing and smuggling. Today, you can still buy mummy brown from some paint shops. Thankfully, it's now made artificially. For the French and their colonial peers, they claimed it was their duty to study the ancient world and bring its knowledge into the modern era. But for people in the countries they colonized, this chapter of history felt like something much darker, much more violent.
You know, because in the last 2 centuries, the European raped the Nile. They came, adventurers, and they raped the Nile. They took all these objects out of the country. Obelisks, statues, huge statues, everything. Mummies. And Egypt had no law to stop selling stolen artifacts until 1983. We made this law that no one really can buy or take any artifacts out of Egypt.
Egypt never had much of a choice in where its history ended up. It also isn't alone in its fight to reclaim it. Whether it's Syria, Ghana, Peru, or any other former colony, much of this history was taken under occupation, and almost none of it has been returned. To this day, even the Greek government is trying to convince the British Museum to return the marble taken from the Parthenon, which its archaeologists have had to replicate in Athens to be able to tell their own story. These countries often don't have the financial means to hire powerful legal firms that can advocate on their behalf. Meanwhile, big museums have in-house legal teams and rely on law firms specializing in helping them push back on these requests. There have been some signs of a turning point, though. In 2018, French President Emmanuel Macron vowed to help repatriate artifacts during a visit to Burkina Faso.
Une large part du patrimoine culturel de plusieurs pays africains soit en France. Il y a des explications historiques à cela, mais il n'y a pas de justification valable, durable et inconditionnelle. Le patrimoine africain ne peut pas être uniquement dans des collections privées et des musées européens.
In 2025, the French Parliament introduced a bill that allows for the return of individual pieces of art that arrived under illicit conditions from any country. But here's a big caveat. The law would only apply to objects stolen between the years 1815 and 1972. That means it won't cover the Napoleonic Wars and the enormous collection of artifacts looted from Egypt. So will Zahi Hawass and others like him convince Western museums to give up their prized possessions, the reasons millions walk through their doors every year? It seems unlikely, but the debate about who owns history isn't going away, because now the descendants of this stolen heritage are speaking louder than ever before, and they want their ancestors to come home.